Now, I don't know if you've ever had the floor yanked out from under you, like one of those cartoon trapdoors that opens up without warning, but that's exactly what it felt like the summer I turned 18. It was 2015, mid-June, hot enough in Missouri to melt the thoughts right out of your head. I'd just finished high school in a town that wasn't worth remembering unless you liked rusted-out trucks and a Dairy Queen that doubled as the social center of the universe. College was on my mind, but my folks had always played it vague. "You'll figure it out, son," Dad would say. "World's your oyster." Turns out, the world was an oyster. Just one I couldn't afford. I came home one muggy Tuesday and saw a for sale sign on the front lawn. Now, we'd talked about moving before. Some pipe dream they had about traveling the country in an RV, chasing sunsets and rest stops. I figured it was retirement talk, something they'd do when their backs went bad and they finally admitted they hated mowing the lawn. But nope. They sold the damn place within 2 weeks. Packed up a couple suitcases, rented out a storage unit, and bought a used Airstream off Facebook Marketplace from a guy named Cliff who smelled like beef jerky and regret. "We need to live for us now," Mom said as she handed me a small duffel bag and an envelope with $600 in it. Dad, never much for words, just clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Time for you to stand on your own, son. This'll build character." Character. Hell of a word to hear when you just lost your roof and your dinner plan all in the same hour. I spent that night on the bleachers at the high school football field, lying under the stars and wondering what the hell just happened. I was 18, with a bag of clothes, $600, and no plan. The only thing I did have was a flip phone with 14% battery, and a cousin who owed me a favor for bailing him out of a raccoon in the attic situation the summer before. That cousin, Eddie, let me crash on his couch. And by couch, I mean a futon older than most of my baby teeth, covered in Dorito dust and haunted by the ghost of Taco Bell farts past. But I was grateful. It beat sleeping in the high school gym, which I'd seriously considered until I remembered the janitor had a tendency to lock the place tighter than Fort Knox. Eddie worked at a gas station and told me they needed help with the night shift. I took the job. Minimum wage, weird hours, but free hot dogs if you timed the rotation right. For the first 6 months, I lived like a ghost. I'd work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., shower at Eddie's, and walk to the library when it opened just to read and nap in the back corner where the security camera was broken. Every now and then, Mom would post a photo on Facebook, her and Dad hiking the Rockies or drinking boxed wine under the stars in Sedona. Living the dream, the caption would read. Not once did she ask if I had a bed to sleep in. Not once did Dad call to see if his son was eating anything other than gas station hot dogs and expired granola bars. They sent a postcard from Utah. A postcard. It said, "Hope you're thriving. The Grand Canyon is breathtaking." I didn't respond. What the hell was I supposed to say? Thanks for the eviction notice and the unsolicited character development. Nah, I just tucked that postcard into the crack of the futon and let it sink into the junk like the rest of my old life. And you know what? Over time, I stopped waiting for them to care. I got a better job, moved out of Eddie's into a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. I fixed up an old pickup from a junkyard and named it Marlene. She shook at red lights and growled uphill, but she ran. By 23, I was holding steady. Nothing fancy, but I wasn't starving. I wasn't couch surfing. I was building something. Quietly. Alone. And then, 5 years later, just when I figured they'd either died happy on a beach in Baja or joined a commune of retired yoga instructors, my doorbell rang. I opened it, and there she was. Mom. Tears down her face. Makeup smudged. Looked like she hadn't slept in days. Behind her, an Uber idled like a dog waiting for a treat. Her first words? "It's your father. He cheated on me." Now, I wish I could say I invited her in, made her tea, and listened to her story with a heart full of forgiveness and a warm quilt in my lap. But that ain't what happened. I laughed. A deep, sharp laugh that came from somewhere buried in 5 years of silence. And then I closed the door right in her face. Didn't say a word. Didn't look back. Just turned the deadbolt and went back to frying eggs in a cast iron skillet I bought secondhand for $5. Because sometimes the people who give you life are the ones who taught you how to live without them. I didn't sleep much that night after Mom showed up crying on my doorstep. Not because I was torn up or full of rage or anything like that. Nah, mostly I was just wired. You ever drink 2 cups of diner coffee at midnight and then try to fall asleep with the memory of your mother's mascara melting down her cheeks like a sad raccoon? That's where I was. I got up around 5, stepped over the cat I never named. He just showed up one day and wouldn't leave, and fired up the skillet again. Pancakes this time. The kind from the box that taste like regret unless you drown him in syrup. But they fill you up, and on mornings like that, a full stomach beats a full heart any day. I sat on the little stool in my kitchen, watching the morning sun creep across the floor like it was sneaking out after a long night. My apartment was nothing fancy. Peeling linoleum, one of those sinks that always dripped even when you threatened it with pliers. But it was mine. No one could sell it out from under me or drive it to Arizona with a suitcase full of tropical shirts. I had a doormat that said, welcome-ish, and I meant every letter of it. So you can imagine how it felt when my past came knocking. I hadn't seen either of my parents in 5 years. Not in person anyway. The occasional photo on Facebook reminded me they still had blood pumping through their hearts and sunscreen on their noses. There was one shot from Mexico, Dad shirtless in a hammock, a margarita in each hand, grinning like a guy who just figured out how to use emojis and isn't afraid to prove it. The caption was, "Freedom tastes like lime." I remembered staring at that post, sitting in the back room at the auto parts warehouse I worked at, covered in brake dust, wondering if they ever once thought about me. Turns out, they didn't. And now suddenly, Mom was at my door, broken down like an old Buick with a blown radiator, because he had done to her what they did to me. Ain't that poetic? I spent most of the morning thinking about that. Not out of bitterness, but more like curiosity. Like when you see a raccoon open a trash can with his tiny raccoon hands and you just go, huh, didn't know they could do that. I thought back to when I was a kid. Mom used to read bedtime stories, never finished one without falling asleep halfway through. Dad taught me to tie a fishing knot, even though we never actually went fishing. He was always too busy, or next weekend turned into next never. They weren't cruel. Just selfish in that smiling, passive way that makes you question your own hurt. I called Eddie later that afternoon. He was still running that same gas station and had been promoted to assistant regional inventory guy, which sounded like a fancy way to say, I count things now. I told him about the mom situation. He laughed so hard he dropped a Slim Jim. Wait, so she came crying? To you? He asked between wheezes. Man, life's a circle of junk, ain't it? Sure is, I said. And I got the front row seat. That evening, I found her scarf outside the door. Left behind in her rush to leave, I guess. Pink and flowery, one of those scarves that's not warm enough for winter and not useful enough for anything else. I folded it up and tossed it in the kitchen drawer next to the batteries and the manual can opener. I didn't call her. Didn't message. Figured if she wanted it, she'd come back. She didn't. Not for a while, anyway. 2 days passed, and then I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It's Mom. Please can we talk? Just 5 minutes. I'm staying at a motel on 19th near the bowling alley. That motel, let me tell you, was where dignity went to die. It was called the Sunset Whisper, which made it sound like a romantic retreat, but it was mostly used by traveling salesmen with no sales and couples cheating on diets and spouses. I didn't answer. Instead, I went to work, clocked in, and spent 8 hours hauling around brake pads and thinking about how far a person has to fall before they realize gravity don't care who you are. See, that's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It don't come with fireworks or dramatic music. Most times, it's quiet, like a faucet drip, or a door closing that used to always stay open. By the weekend, I was back in the groove. Oil changes, grocery runs, laundry on Sunday. I wasn't angry, just resolved. Like someone who found peace in knowing the storm already came and went, and all that's left now is cleanup. Then one night, maybe a week later, I got off work and found a brown paper bag on my porch. Inside, a photo album. One of the old ones, with those sticky pages and faded corners. It had my name written in Sharpie on the front, for Eli, for Mom. First page was me as a baby, chewing on a rubber duck like it owed me money. Second page was Christmas '03. Dad in his recliner, snoring under a blanket while I opened socks from Aunt Millie. And on the last page, a note, written in that same curly handwriting Mom used on birthday cards. I know we don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to have the good memories too, before everything went wrong. Now, I won't lie to you. I sat on that porch with that album in my lap for a good long while. The cat, who I'd started calling Bob, just so I had someone to talk to, jumped up beside me and started licking his foot like this whole human drama didn't concern him at all. And that was when I realized something. I didn't miss them. Not really. I missed who I thought they were. But who they actually were. Well, they were the kind of folks who'd sell the house out from under their kid and call it freedom. The kind who'd only come back around when life turned on him. That ain't family. That's just blood. And blood don't mean much when it leaves you bleeding. About a week after the photo album showed up, I passed by the Sunset Whisper on my way to grab a six-pack from the liquor store next to the pawn shop. The place looked even worse in daylight, like a flea market married a vending machine and gave birth to a dying fern in the lobby. 2 cars in the lot. One of them looked like it hadn't moved since the Clinton administration. I sat in the truck a minute, engine idling, just watching that sad little sign flicker like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. Part of me thought about going in. Not to talk. Just to see. Maybe get a look at what rock bottom looked like in mascara and a sun at. But in the end, I put the truck in gear and drove away. I didn't owe her a visit just because she'd finally tripped over her own bad decisions. That night, I cracked open a beer, threw on an old hoodie, and sat on the fire escape outside my apartment like I used to back when I couldn't afford cable. You see things clearer from up high, even if it's just 3 floors up with a view of the laundromat dumpster. I kept thinking about that photo album. Not the pictures, but the gesture. It was like she was trying to rewrite the past in scrapbook pages. Like if she could remind me of the one time Dad made pancakes in a Santa hat, I'd forget the part where they left me to rot on a futon eating cereal with a screwdriver because we didn't own spoons. Here's the thing. I didn't hate her. Not really. Hate takes effort. And she wasn't worth that. What I felt was something quieter. Like that feeling you get when you realize you've been holding on to a key to a door that doesn't exist anymore. Around midnight, I got another text. I just want to explain. That's all. Please. I didn't respond. Instead, I took that photo album, walked it out to the alley, and gently set it on top of the recycling bin. Not angrily. Just done. Next morning, I found it sitting back on my porch. Like a puppy that didn't understand it had been left behind. Only this time, it had a sticky note on it. You forgot this. Mom. Now that annoyed me. Because it meant she was watching. Waiting. Like she figured if she just wore me down enough, I'd break and let her back in. That's when I realized this wasn't about guilt. It was about her needing to feel like she hadn't failed completely. Like if I forgave her, it'd patch the hole she was dragging around. But life ain't a sitcom. You don't get heartwarming montages and hugs over pancakes. Sometimes people burn a bridge and then act surprised when they find themselves on an island. So I picked up that album again, walked 2 blocks over, and dropped it in a different dumpster behind the Little Caesars. No sticky note this time. No ceremony. Just closure. After that, things got quiet again. Too quiet, if I'm being honest. It's funny, when someone messes you up real good, you expect to feel something dramatic when you finally cut him off. A rush of freedom. A collapse of sorrow. Maybe even a few poetic tears, if you're that type. But what I felt? Relief. Like pulling off a pair of boots that never fit right to begin with. That's when I decided to put my energy into something useful. I'd been working the same parts warehouse job for years by then. Solid pay, good crew, but no real future. I started taking night classes at the community college. Business management, basic accounting, a course on supply chain logistics that was drier than unbuttered toast. But I stuck with it. I'd wake up at 6, work from 7 to 3, go to class till 9, and fall asleep reading textbooks with the cat snoring on my chest like a warm, furry paperweight. By the time I was 25, I got offered a promotion at work, floor supervisor. Came with a pay bump in my own tiny office that smelled like whiteout and lost ambition. I took it anyway. Framed a photo of Marlene, the truck, not a woman, and hung it up next to the Employee of the Month plaques. She deserved it more than some of those guys. Life started to smooth out. Nothing flashy, but stable, steady, like a truck that's been tuned just right after years of knocking. Then one evening, just as I was coming home from class, I saw a car parked outside my building. It was an old Buick, one of those bulky models with more trunk than dignity. And sitting inside, staring at my door like she was rehearsing a speech, was Mom. I stood there a second, debating whether to pretend I didn't see her. I had a gallon of milk in one hand and a frozen pizza under my arm. Real domestic scene. Eventually, I walked past the car, slow and calm. She rolled down the window. Eli, she said, voice shaky like she was testing if it still worked. I don't know where else to go. I looked her right in the eye, took a long breath, and said the words I'd been waiting 5 years to say. That's not my problem. And I walked inside. Didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. just closed the door and locked it. She sat out there for another 20 minutes. Then she drove off. I watched from the fire escape, sipping my beer, listening to the hum of the city and the neighbor's chihuahua trying to pick a fight with a leaf. And I thought, that's what a boundary feels like. Not dramatic, not cruel, just solid. Like a front porch that don't creak no more. Now, I ain't the kind of man who holds a grudge like a precious family heirloom, but I do believe in leaving the past where it belongs, behind you, buried under a healthy layer of I've moved on. That Buick never showed up again after that last encounter. I figured she got the message loud and clear, maybe for the first time in her life. And let me tell you, not answering that knock at the emotional door, that was a better feeling than payday. The days rolled on. I got a new routine going. Wake up, coffee, curse at the cat for knocking something off the counter, go to work, take classes, eat questionable leftovers, sleep. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And after years of being left behind, I'd built a life no one could take away with a "we just need to do this for us" speech. Funny thing happens when you stop hoping people will come back. You start focusing on the ones who never left. Eddie still checked in once a week, usually calling me during his smoke break with a piece of gossip from the gas station. "Remember old Ricky with the lazy eye?" he'd say. Turns out he won the lottery, bought himself a used Corvette, and drove it into a mailbox same day. That kind of news was better than cable. And the cat, Bob, well, he settled into his role as co-owner of the apartment. I once caught him watching a YouTube tutorial on how to open cabinets. Never did figure out how he got the laptop on, but I respect the hustle. Meanwhile, I kept climbing, took on more at work, helped streamline the inventory system, and even got invited to corporate meetings where people used phrases like Q4 optimization and pivot strategy like they actually meant something. I mostly just nodded, took notes, and drank the free coffee. Turns out, if you show up on time and don't talk too much, people assume you're competent. Then one Wednesday, just another bland middle-of-the-week day, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. An actual letter. Handwritten. Smelled faintly like lavender soap and regret. It was from my dad. I'll admit, that one caught me off guard. I hadn't heard a peep from him in years. Mom was the emotional grenade in our family. Dad was more like a silent landmine. Dangerous, but only if you stepped on him. I opened the letter slow, like it might explode. It was 2 pages long. Neat handwriting. Classic dad. Always precise, always boring. Started off with the usual. "I hope you're well. I've been meaning to write." Then it got weirder. "Your mother and I are no longer speaking. Things have shifted." He used the word shifted like he was talking about tectonic plates, not the fact he'd apparently dumped Mom in a motel and moved on with some woman named Lorraine, who owned a sailboat and made homemade jam. What got me wasn't the cheating. It was the tone of the letter. Like he was filling out a form. No apology. No, "Sorry we left you homeless at 18. Just a play-by-play of how his new life involved kayaking and pottery classes. Then, buried near the end. "Your mother is not handling things well. I thought maybe you could reach out. She always valued your bond." My bond. The same one they cut loose like a barge with no anchor? I folded the letter, stuffed it in the junk drawer with the coupons I never used, and went about my day. Because I finally understood something about my parents. They were the kind of people who only saw others in terms of usefulness. When I was little, I made them feel needed. When I got older, I made them feel guilty. So they let me go? And now that they were sinking in their own bad choices, they wanted a life raft. Only I wasn't going to be the one to throw it. That weekend, Eddie came by with a 6-pack and a busted toaster he wanted me to look at. We sat on the porch, fixing it with duct tape and stubbornness, while he caught me up on life. "You hear from the folks?" he asked casually, like he was asking about the weather. I nodded toward the junk drawer. "Dad wrote me. Wants me to check on Mom." Eddie cracked open a beer, took a swig, and snorted. "Well, ain't that rich? Man drops you like a bad stock tip, and now he wants you to clean up his mess." "Yeah," I said, "but I ain't in the janitor business no more." Eddie laughed so hard he nearly fell off the step. That was the moment I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't the kid on the futon anymore. I wasn't the guy hoping for a birthday call or waiting on someone to finally do right by him. I was Eli, 28, quiet, self-made, with a cat, a reliable truck, and a damn fine pancake recipe. I didn't need closure, didn't need revenge, didn't even need to be understood. I just needed to stay gone from the life that once left me behind. And I was doing a hell of a job at it. 2 weeks passed after that letter. I figured that'd be the end of it. Dad had said his piece, tried to pass the emotional baton like we were running some kind of broken family relay, and I had politely tossed it in the nearest trash can. Then came a knock on my door. Now, I'd like to say I've got one of those instincts, like a dog that knows a storm's coming, but truth is, I was halfway through a meatball sub and watching a YouTube video about fixing a carburetor with a fork when I heard it. 3 knocks. Soft. Unsure. I peeked through the peephole, and there she was. Mom. Again. Same sad eyes. Same messy hair like she'd just walked out of a wind tunnel full of guilt and hairspray. Different jacket this time, but the same woman. I didn't open the door. Instead, I cracked the window by the side and leaned out like I was airing out a rug. What do you want? I asked, no heat in my voice. Just steady, like someone who'd already sat through this episode once. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. He left me. For that woman. Lorraine. Yeah, I said. I read about her in the newsletter. That earned a flinch. I'll admit, I was proud of that line. She shifted from one foot to the other, clutched a purse that looked older than Bob the cat. I'm not asking for much. Just a place to get on my feet. I thought about it. I really did. And then I thought about sleeping on Eddie's crusty futon, about eating off-brand cereal while my parents were posting selfies from the Grand Canyon. I thought about that first night alone, when I stared at the ceiling and realized I didn't even know how to apply for health insurance. And then I said, calm as ever, there's a shelter 2 blocks down. Real clean. Friendly folks. Tell Eli sent you. She blinked, took a step forward. Eli, I'm your mother. No, I said. You were. Now you're just someone I used to know. And then I closed the window. She stood there for a while. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't even listen for the car. Just turned on the kettle, made a cup of tea, and sat down with Bob curled at my feet like nothing had happened. See, people like to talk about forgiveness like it's some kind of moral trophy. Something you give to prove you're better than the ones who hurt you. But I don't think that's always true. Sometimes, forgiveness is just another leash. A way for folks to wiggle back into your life with promises and tears and the kind of look that says, I didn't mean to, but can we just skip the consequences part? And I was done with skipping consequences. I still had the photo album from Little Caesars, by the way. Turns out the recycling guy left it behind my door with a sticky note that read, looked important. I tossed it in a plastic tub under my bed. Maybe one day I'll flip through it again. Maybe not. Life went on. I took a trip to Nashville just for the hell of it. Rented a cheap motel, walked around with a backpack, and listened to street musicians play like they'd never been hurt by anyone in their lives. Bought a harmonica on impulse and learned exactly one song on it. Bob hated it, which made it worth every penny. Then, a month later, I got a call from Eddie. You sitting down, he said. Technically, I replied. I'm in line at the DMV. Well, you won't believe who just called the station looking for work. I didn't have to guess. Your mom, he said. She sounded like a wet paper bag with too many groceries in it. Apparently, she'd been couch hopping between friends and cousins, and the welcome mats were wearing thin. Now she was calling old acquaintances like Eddie, hoping for a break. I didn't say nothing bad about you, he added. But I also didn't help her. Good, I said. She's got to figure out what I did at 18, with a hell of a lot less. And ain't that the truth? The years had turned me into someone I didn't expect. Not bitter, not cruel, just solid. Like a fence post sunk deep and straight. I didn't swing at ghosts. I didn't chase apologies. And I damn sure didn't answer doors just because someone finally ran out of gas. Mom didn't get the job at the station. I heard she left town not long after. Word is, she's in Kansas now, staying with some cousin who collects wind chimes and once tried to sell me essential oils in high school. Haven't heard from her since. And you know what? I sleep just fine. By the time fall rolled around, Missouri was starting to trade in its heat stroke for a proper chill. Leaves were falling like bad habits, and Bob the cat had taken to sleeping on top of the fridge where the warmth from the motor kept his old bones humming. Life had settled into something I'd call honest. Not perfect. Not easy. But mine. Then one Sunday evening, I was frying up some pork chops, listening to an old CCR record crackle through the speakers, when I heard another knock. Now, after all the recent drama, knocks made me cautious. I moved to the door like a man checking for termites, slow, suspicious, with a frying pan still in one hand. I looked through the peephole, and for the first time in a while, I actually smiled. It was Eddie, holding a six-pack and wearing that dumb camo jacket with the hole in the elbow he refuses to throw away. I brought beer and gossip, he said as I opened the door. And I'm hungry enough to eat your cat. Bob disagrees, I said, stepping aside. But the pork chops don't. He walked in, set the beer on the counter, and sniffed the air like a cartoon hound. Smells like a man who doesn't need approval from nobody. Smells like garlic and butter, I said, flipping a chop. But close enough. We ate dinner like we had 100 times before. Two guys with no particular agenda, just stories and jokes, and the occasional debate about whether Velveeta counts as cheese. I say no. Eddie says yes. Society remains divided. Then, halfway through his third beer, he leaned back and said, "You ever think about starting your own family?" That one hit different. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and leaned against the counter. What? Like, get married? Have kids? Or adopt a raccoon? I don't know, man, he said. Just, you ever think about building something from scratch? The kind that don't fall apart when someone gets bored. I stared at the stove a minute, watching the last of the pork sizzle in the pan. The idea of having a family used to feel like a distant lighthouse, something other people aimed for while I rode in circles trying not to sink. But lately, I've been thinking about it. Not in the cheesy, Hallmark way. More like the quiet kind. Sunday dinners. A porch swing. Maybe someone who'd laugh at my bad harmonica playing and put up with Bob's tendency to puke on new rugs. Yeah, I said finally. I think about it. Good, Eddie said, grabbing another beer. 'Cause if anyone deserves to write their own chapter, it's you. He left an hour later, leaving behind a half-eaten pack of Oreos and a warm feeling I hadn't had in years. The kind you don't get from apologies or money. The kind that comes from knowing someone actually sees you, not for what you used to be, but for who you are now. Later that night, I sat on the fire escape again, watching the city wind down. And I realized something. Family ain't about blood. Never was. It's about who shows up. It's about who sticks around. Eddie had shown up. Bob, in his own feline way, had stuck around. Even the guy downstairs who always borrowed my tools and never returned them, that fella offered me chili last week. It was terrible, but it meant something. Maybe one day I'd have more people around my table. A wife, maybe. A kid or two who never had to wonder if they mattered. But if that never came, I'd still be all right. Because I'd built a life out of ashes, and it held strong. Stronger than the house my parents sold. Stronger than the bonds they broke. And that, my friend, is what you call freedom. About 2 months later, just when I'd started thinking my past had finally gotten the message, a letter showed up again. This time, the envelope was plain white, no perfume, no flowery stickers, no overstuffed dramatics. Just my name written in tight, careful script. I held it like it was a piece of live bait. Sat down at the kitchen table, Bob eyeballing me from the windowsill like he was waiting for another story to unfold. Inside was a single page. Just one. From my dad. Eli. I know I said my piece before. I didn't expect a response. Still don't. But I've been thinking about something you said, or rather, something you didn't say. That silence told me more than I wanted to hear. I won't ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't know what to do with it even if you gave it. But I wanted to say this much. I was wrong. We failed you. I failed you. And if that cost me a relationship with you for good, then I deserve it. I just hope you know, it wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because I wasn't. Take care of yourself. You always did better at that than we did for you. Dad. I sat there a long while after that. Not angry. Not touched. Just still. It was the first time in my life the man had said anything that resembled actual honesty. Not manipulation. Not, we did our best. Just, I failed you. That alone didn't fix anything. But it did confirm what I'd known deep down for a long time. They knew what they'd done. Maybe not in the moment, but sure as hell by now. And still, I didn't write back. Because sometimes people think saying sorry is a ticket back in. But this wasn't a revolving door. It was a wall. One I'd built with my own hands, brick by brick. Not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. You learn a lot when you spend your 20s patching up the holes someone else left. You learn that healing don't always mean hugging it out on a porch swing. Sometimes healing is just not letting them back in to wreck the place twice. That weekend, I went on a date. First one in a while. Her name was Harper, taught English at the middle school and had a laugh like windshield wipers on high speed. We met at a bookstore, bumped into each other over a stack of paperbacks with titles like 10 Steps to Stop Sabotaging Yourself. I made a joke about how I'd need at least 20 steps. She laughed. We got coffee. One thing led to another, and suddenly Sunday mornings weren't just me and Bob anymore. Now, I'm not saying Harper saved me. I wasn't looking to be saved. But she was kind. Real kind. The sort of woman who listens with her eyes and calls you out when you dodge a question. She had her own scars, divorced young, parents halfway across the country, figured family was a thing she'd missed the boat on. We understood each other in that quiet way people do when they've both been left behind. After a few weeks, I told her about my folks. All of it. The house. The suitcase. The door slam. And you know what she said? Damn. Just that. And then she passed me the chips and salsa like I hadn't just dropped a personal documentary on the table. That's when I knew she was different. She didn't try to fix it. Didn't tell me to reach out or find peace. She just accepted it. Accepted me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone with a sad backstory. I felt like a guy who'd walked through fire and learned how to grow tomatoes in the ash. That's a special kind of peace. And it only shows up once you stop looking for answers in people who never had him to begin with. Now, I always figured holidays were like mirrors. They don't create joy or pain. They just reflect whatever's already there. And for most of my adult life, Christmas had been a time for eating cheap ham alone and watching Die Hard while Bob tried to eat the wrapping paper off my leftovers. But that year 28 for me, or as I started calling it, the year I'd build a backbone, Christmas came around with a different energy. It was Harper's idea. I know you're not into holiday stuff, she said, stirring hot cocoa with the kind of focus usually reserved for bomb defusal. But I make a mean roasted chicken, and I already bought too many potatoes. Now, I don't know how you turn down a woman who's voluntarily roasting birds and inviting you over with too many potatoes as her sales pitch. So I said yes. Her place was cozy. One of those small craftsman homes with uneven floors and a cat that hated everyone but her. It felt lived in. Honest. We had dinner on her back porch, bundled up in sweaters, her dog curled at our feet, and Bob, who I brought in a carrier, eyeballing the chicken like it owed him rent. No gifts. Just food, quiet music, and a little flask of bourbon we passed back and forth like old friends on a camping trip. And somewhere between the second helping of mashed potatoes and her showing me how to play one song on the ukulele, it hit me. This was the family I'd been missing. Not the kind that shares your DNA. The kind that shows up, listens, laughs, asks how your day was and actually wants the answer. She asked about my parents that night. Not to pry. Just softly. You think you'll ever talk to them again? I shook my head. Not unless they knock on the door of a therapist's office and stay long enough to figure out where they went wrong. She smirked. That'll be the day. We toasted to that. After dinner, we sat by her little gas fireplace and watched Bob try to assert dominance over her dog by sleeping in its bed. He lost, but I admired the effort. I slept over that night. First time since I was a teenager that I didn't spend Christmas under a roof I paid for. Felt strange and warm and just right. That winter passed slowly. Work stayed steady. My boss offered to bump me up to operations manager, which meant more responsibility, but also more money and less time on the warehouse floor breaking my back for a paycheck. I took it. Started thinking about buying a house. Not a big one, just something with a porch and a patch of grass for Bob to ruin. Harper and I kept seeing each other. She had this way of grounding me without tying me down. Never asked for more than I could give, but always gave more than she had to. You don't take that for granted, not when you've seen what the wrong kind of love can do. Around March, she asked me if I'd ever want to meet her folks. They're old hippies, she said. My dad still wears sandals with socks, and my mom sells homemade candles with names like Moon Butter and Lavender Regret. Sounds like a sitcom, I said. I'll bring the laugh track. That dinner went surprisingly well. Her dad grilled steaks in the middle of a rainstorm under a tarp held up by broomsticks. Her mom tried to get me to join her meditation circle. I politely declined and offered to chop wood instead. They liked me. Said I had a steady energy, which, I'll be honest, might be the first time anyone's ever said that to me without also asking me to fix a leaking faucet. It was around then that I stopped thinking of myself as someone recovering from being abandoned, and started thinking of myself as someone who survived it. Big difference. Surviving is quiet. It ain't about revenge. It's about waking up, making eggs, feeding the cat, paying the light bill, and building something so damn solid no one can knock it down again. That spring, I planted tomatoes in 3 buckets on my fire escape. Only one of them grew anything worth eating, but it still felt like a victory, because it was mine, and no one could sell it out from under me. It was early summer when it happened. The air was thick with that kind of heat that sticks to your skin like cheap cologne, and Bob had started spending most afternoons flopped belly up in front of the box fan, convinced he was seconds from death by humidity. I'd just come back from a weekend at Harper's, helping her fix a sagging fence post and accidentally introducing her to the fine art of overcooked burgers. When I saw the letter, no envelope this time, just a folded piece of notebook paper stuck in my doorframe like a high school breakup note. I knew the handwriting before I even touched it. Mom's. I stood there a while, thought about just throwing it away, not even reading it. But part of me was curious. Not hopeful, just curious, like a guy poking a snake with a stick to see if it's still alive. It was short, barely a paragraph. I don't expect anything. I just needed to say I'm sorry. Not because I want back in. Just because I finally realized you deserved better than what we gave you. I'm staying with a friend for now. I won't bother you again. Signed with her name. Not Mom. Just Karen. That told me everything I needed to know. The line had been drawn. She knew she'd crossed it. She also knew I wasn't moving it. And true to her word, I never heard from her again. No texts. No calls. No birthday cards with forced apologies scribbled between the lines. It was done. Now, I'll be honest, some folks don't understand that kind of ending. They want the big reunion, the tearful hug, the movie moment where someone says, I was wrong, and everyone cries over a pie. But life ain't a movie. Sometimes the best ending you get is silence. And if you've ever lived with chaos, you know how sweet silence can be. Harper and I took a trip that summer, just a little road run through the Ozarks, stayed in a cheap cabin with yellow curtains and a broken screen door. We drank coffee on the porch, talked about everything and nothing, and I realized I hadn't thought about my parents in days. That's healing. Not because I forgot what happened, but because it didn't define me anymore. I told Harper the full story one night by the fire. All of it. No jokes. No skipping the ugly parts. Just laid it out plain. She didn't say much after. Just held my hand and said, You've done damn well, Eli. And that meant more than any apology ever could. See, by 28, I had finally figured out that family isn't who you come from, it's who comes through for you. Eddie, who never let me fall too far. Harper, who saw me before I even knew what I looked like without all the baggage. Bob, who, as I speak, just knocked over a plant for absolutely no reason other than chaos. And me. I showed up, every day. Kept working. Kept trying. Kept living. That makes a family, too. A one-man army of persistence. By the time August rolled around, I had signed paperwork for a little house out past the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just 2 bedrooms, a backyard with patchy grass, and a garage that smelled like old paint and promise. It was mine. Bought it with my own money, on my own credit, without a cosigner or a soul to ask permission from. The day I got the keys, I stood in the empty living room and just listened. To the creak of the floor. To the hum of the fridge. To the sound of nothing. It was perfect. And for the first time in a decade, I felt safe. It's been about a year now since that final note. A year since I stood in an empty house, holding a set of keys that felt heavier than they oughta, like they were unlocking more than just doors. And you know what? It's been good. Really good. The kind of good that doesn't come with fireworks or grand announcements. Just a slow, steady hum of peace. Like the sound of a well-tuned engine or a porch swing in the wind. Harper moved in a few months back. Not because we rushed anything. We didn't. But one day she brought over a toothbrush, then a mug, then her weird lemon-scented shampoo that made my whole bathroom smell like a bakery. And before I knew it, there were 2 pairs of boots by the door and a sock were happening in the laundry basket. And I liked it. She made the place feel warmer. Not by redecorating, though she did swap out my Deer in the Forest wall calendar for one with quotes about growth and plants I still can't name, but just by being in it. Her laugh filled corners of the house I hadn't realized were empty. Even Bob started acting like less of a tyrant. Still knocked things off shelves, but now he did it with flair. We started having Sunday dinners. Sometimes just the 2 of us. Sometimes Eddie came by with a 6-pack and his newest theory about why the squirrels in his neighborhood were organized and out for revenge. Sometimes we grilled. Sometimes we burned things and ordered pizza. Nobody cried. Nobody begged. Nobody brought up the past like it was a trophy or a weapon. It was just quiet. Steady. Home. One afternoon, I was out on the porch staining the railing when a neighbor from down the block walked by. Nice lady. Mid-50s, wore visors unironically, and always smelled like cinnamon gum. She stopped and said, "Looks like you're settling in real nice here." I smiled and wiped my hands on a rag. "Yeah," I said. "Took a while, but I found my spot." She nodded, then looked up at the porch light. "You leave that thing off all the time?" I glanced at it. Dusty bulb. Hadn't turned it on since I moved in. Yeah, I said. It's not broken. Just not for anyone who left. She didn't get it, but that was all right. Some things aren't meant for everyone. See, there's this thing people say when they talk about family. That the porch light's always on. That no matter what, you can come home. But I learned different. Sometimes, you shouldn't leave the light on. Sometimes the people who left don't deserve the warm welcome. Sometimes, they don't get a second helping at the table they walked away from. And that's okay. It ain't cruel. It's just consequences. I still think about my parents sometimes. Mostly in passing. Wonder if Dad ever got tired of Lorraine's jam jars, or if Mom finally figured out who she was without anyone there to blame. But I don't miss them. Not anymore. What I missed, stability, kindness, a place to belong. I went out and built myself. Piece by piece. Late shift by late shift. Burn bridge by brand new path. And now? Now I've got a home. Not a perfect one, but one with laughter in the kitchen, quiet in the evenings, and a cat that keeps the furniture humble. And that's more than they ever gave me. So no, I won't leave the porch light on. But I'll sit here, now and then, beer in hand, Harper beside me, Bob dozing nearby, and I'll watch the sunset from a place I built myself. And I'll smile. Because sometimes, the best revenge is peace.